All right, so let's talk about hyperlocal marketing. Ladies, will you please start with introducing yourselves?
Yes. Hi, I'm Jasmine Mobley. My career has been in CPG brand management, so started at Procter & Gamble, worked at Native, if any of you buy our deodorant or body wash, and then Positiv Health leading the international business. So I have a general management background and really excited to talk to you guys today about consumers and all that fun stuff.
I don't know if this was arranged that way. So my name is Kate Voyten. I also started out at Procter & Gamble.
We're everywhere.
But in the last 10 years have shifted into healthcare and decided to join a company that I was on the board of and wanted to be part of a community that changes how women get contraceptive access. So versus the first conversation, I'm going to make you super uncomfortable and talk about when the moment in sex fails and you don't want to get pregnant and you need a product. So we'll talk a little bit about birth control and contraceptives.
All right, already getting spicy. It's only, 10:30 a.m.? Okay, awesome. Thank you both. So let's just start out with your why. Why has hyperlocal marketing become such a priority for your brand, and how does it fit into your broader growth strategies? Start us off, Jasmine.
I can go, yeah. I think that as I was thinking about this question, I think it's really important, it's obvious almost when you're launching a business internationally to think about, how do you talk to that consumer, especially if there's a language difference. But I remember ever since I started my career at P&G, and maybe it's because I'm a Black woman, I think I see the world a little differently. I think if you're aware of yourself, you're aware of other people. And I've always thought, I was our first person to say, well, maybe we should have Hispanic creative and not just dub it, but actually have a woman from a different country speak to her experience. And so I think that if you can't understand the people, I think like Kim said, if you can't understand the consumer, you don't have a business, you have nothing really to talk about. And so I think if you understand them at their heart, you can create local strategies that make sense, whether that's local in the United States or local in a different country. So I think it all comes down to just the people, understanding them and telling their story in a way that they want to hear it.
I couldn't agree more, but I would say that our journey was a little bit different. And maybe what I'd start out with is just sharing why we got to where we got to. So the company was originally founded on the idea that we want to increase access to birth control. If you don't know this, probably because not everybody looks this up on a regular basis, but in the US, more than 40% of pregnancies every year are unintended. That's roughly 2.3 million women who had not expected to be pregnant and become pregnant. Part of the reason that this is so high is because in this country, it is difficult to get access to contraceptive compared to other places. So one issue is price. Healthcare is quite expensive. And the other piece is accessibility. So the physical place where you can get the product and how easy it is to get it. Now, we are working on taking the most popular birth control pill over the counter. It's a process that takes a very long time. You have to work with the FDA and make it OTC available. But when the Dobbs decision came down a couple of years ago, our founders basically asked the question of what can we do to increase access to contraceptives today? And the key product that's available that's over the counter is something called an emergency contraceptive. And essentially what it is it's a hormone that prevents you from releasing the egg. So and again, sorry, I'm going to get some spicy in here, but when you're having sex and there is a moment, it helps you prevent from getting pregnant because there's no egg released, and if there's no egg, there is no baby. The challenge with this product, though, is it has to be taken as soon as possible. So imagine you have this situation in the country where, as you're familiar with it, all these drugstores are closing. So left and right, you have Rite Aid going out of business, Walgreens, CVS are not available anymore. And all of a sudden, you have a massive shift in where consumers are starting to shop for this product. Now, I come from the Silicon Valley kind of the world here, so everybody says, ship it, send it over. Well, that may work for you if you have at delivery in San Francisco, which is where we are, so you can get it really quickly there. However, it's a problem if you live in an area where it could take 2 to 3 days to get that product delivered to your home. So the online solution is not really available. So what we decided to do, and what led to this hyper-local or local approach, is we said, well, where are in these communities locations where you can buy product? And those community locations are convenience stores. So 7-Eleven and Circle K and Wawa. Well, a third of condoms are sold there, but no emergency contraceptives or women's products are sold there. So we actually adjusted to a market need that said, hey, you want to go local, you really have to go local and find store locations in your neighborhood that allow you to carry the product. And that comes with a host of problems. We can talk about those later. But the challenge for us then became is you actually have to be hyperlocal, because our audience, when they're looking for the product, they need it right away. So it's not a national approach for where you can find it. It's is there a community store within a 5-mile radius of where I live that typically on a weekend after 8 p.m. is open so that I can go get the product? And so the market actually shifted, and as the market shifted, it forced us to go into a much more hyper-local activation.
Wow, there's a lot of complexity there. We're going to get into that, all of that in just a second. Jasmine, just to quickly bounce to you, your role has a bit of an international lens. How do you balance kind of global brand consistency with local flexibility, especially across markets that are widely different in regulations and media behavior, consumer behavior, et cetera?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. I think the biggest thing that I do whenever I start on a business is try to understand, one, what is the heart of the brand? If the brand is not a new brand, like, why do people love it today? Usually when I've been brought onto a business, it's to either grow it or turn it around or something like that. But I really believe that there are people who love it, and so understand why those people love it, and that there will be through lines that are consistent across geographies, across backgrounds. I try to figure out usually, and again, this goes down to like just being obsessed with consumers. I try to go down and figure out, even within the US, right, are there any differences based on where someone lives? When we're launching in London, like, it's very different if you're launching in London versus in Ireland, and you're launching at Boots in Ireland versus Scotland or something like that. So really just trying to understand who the people are that love it. I do love to do like consumer focus groups and just chat with them, even if it's something like a coffee chat, or on Native, we did a dinner with the original people who bought Native from like 10 years ago, and just ask them why they love it. At one point, I was really curious, like, why was nobody in the South buying Native? And it turns out you don't want to sweat in the South. The risk of failure for a clean deodorant is really high. And so figuring out, like, okay, well, that shifted our media strategy, where I only wanted to market on the coast and like the Midwest and places where the weather profile was similar. So like that was a hyper-local thing. And then just thinking about, same thing when you launch outside of the US, even something as simple as which countries are we launching in and why? Like, you could look at the numbers and just say, oh, well, this is a big geography, let's go launch there. But like, does your brand have a right to win there? Will people know what it is? Will they care? What's the competitive landscape like? Also, like, especially in women's health, like, what are the conversations that are currently being had about women's health? Can you be bold in the way that you want to be? Is there a different kind of sensitivity or even like appetite for different conversations? So I think just going in with a hypothesis based on an understanding of the brand, trying to get to know the consumer, and then just not being afraid to shift your strategy and even sometimes take a different approach. I'm sure Kate knows too, like at P&G sometimes we would launch a brand internationally and change the name because the name doesn't work the same way. You know, in India, we would call it Whisper, and in the US, it's called Always, things like that. So and there's a consumer insight about that, right? Because in India, it's really sensitive to talk about periods or women's health in general, right? So just, I think not being afraid to take those kind of risks that may be scary as you sit here in our seats in the US, but being comfortable to really like get deep and understand and push yourself to serve the consumer.
Yeah. Okay. Again, complexity is all over the place. So bouncing back to you then, Kate, at Cadence OTC, you're operating at both a national level to build awareness, but then you have to get down to the regional level and you have to drive demand. Can you tell us about some of those nuances there? What does that actually look like day to day in practice?
Sure. So we actually have a very different, I would say the who, and again, we'll go back to some basic frameworks here, a different who and a different what from a creative and how we go to those locations. Mostly because this is not a category that people plan for, and it's not something that they put into their medicine cabinet. So on a national level, what we try to do is focus the message and the approach on how to build trust in who we are. Because while a woman may buy kind of an unknown brand in Tylenol to remove their headache, when we interviewed women and said, would you buy a brand you didn't know for emergency contraceptives? And they said, absolutely not. Because there is one brand in the category that originally launched it, and it's the category captain. So the national advertising and the nuance there has to be really about how would you trust us and why would we be an option for you versus what's out in the market. On a local level, and this is very, very scrappy, it is finding local talent to run advertising, to do search-based intent purchase, because when you're looking, you're looking. So you're not looking for Wednesday, you're looking for today, tonight. I need this product today. And so how do we immediately show up both in your search approach as well as your social feed as a brand that you trust? And what we found, and I think you shared about this, Jasmine, is that we've used a lot of local talent and influencer content creators, because you trust someone that you can recognize in South Carolina versus a Northeasterner who will talk to you like they're from New Hampshire, Boston, or Connecticut. So the complexity for us then turned into, there's a lot of different states and a lot of different personalities that you're trying to speak to. And what you say is also very different, because the sentiment in a state like Texas for this product is very different than California. And so we had to find an appropriate way and scale it, which is still something we're working through, that you can get a broad reach of content creators and on a local level activate when she's looking for this. So I don't necessarily wish we had that complexity. That's not the direction we wanted to go, but it's the reality of some of the challenges we need to overcome, which is broadly high level, I want people to trust our brand, but locally, and if you happen to do an Uber Eats or a DoorDash and you look morning after pill this morning, I want our product to be at the top, and I want to make sure that we serve you up with trusted content so you can find it at your local 7-Eleven, which it is there, by the way. I had to go check because that wouldn't be fair to do it.
Nice. Okay, so interesting. What are some of those examples of hyperlocal activations or partnerships that have really moved the needle for your brand?
Okay, so I have a favorite one of all time that I did. When I worked on This Is Elle, which is an organic period care brand, we got to work with this Oscar-winning documentarian. Like, she had won an Oscar at age 25,
Wow.
talking about period poverty, and she was super impressive. She and her husband worked together. And it's not like Cardi B, but similarly, they reached out to us, wanting to see if we would, do a collaboration with them, like help create the documentary. So I got to help work on a documentary, which is very cool. But the documentary was about basically rituals around periods in indigenous communities in the United States. And I think what was really interesting is we got to help tell that story, which I think was great. But then what we did from a marketing standpoint was I stood back and I thought to myself, okay, well, if we market to just indigenous communities, that's great, and that's the story, but I want more people to hear this story. And so just thinking about who and where would this story resonate, like where are, there are lots of like Native American reservations and people who are vocal about these topics, right? And so what we did is we went to different cities around the United States where we had identified that there was like a lot of interest maybe in this sort of story, like places that had been interested in the period poverty conversation, places that were interested in women's health in general. And we did little pop-ups with local artists, like Native American indigenous artists, who were telling the story of period poverty, talking about their experience growing up with their period in this community and the challenges of that, the beauty of that. They actually do these beautiful ceremonies to celebrate the coming of age of a woman. And so we did little pop-ups around the United States that were illustrating that in conjunction with artists from this community. And we got to have like the women who were featured in the film with us to help tell the story. And then it also helped that she got into like every festival like that that you can imagine and won a lot of awards. So we were able to do a lot of activations around that. But I think it all really does come down to storytelling. And I think that was one of the greatest honors, I think, so far of my career. For not necessarily because it was flashy, but because we got to tell a story that was really important that doesn't normally get told, and I think and highlight people, artists, women from a community that often gets overshadowed. And it turned out that that really resonated across the U.S., which I think that was super special because sometimes we can feel like we're all so different, but ultimately I think there's a lot more that unifies us and that we're similar about.
Cool. Okay, so let's pivot the conversation to data. What kinds of local signals or metrics are you relying on, both to assess where you need to focus your marketing dollars, but then also measure success at the end of the day?
Sure. So we've been on this journey actually on how to measure success, and data has been a guide. There's actually an example I would use here because we had originally wanted to look at activities that had a pretty high engagement level or a good amount of comments. And I think what we very quickly learned was that while it was very important for us to have that sentiment, it actually didn't translate to purchase, at least not for when we needed to translate for purchase. So one of the things that I talked to a few of you last night and said, like, what do you want to hear about? Well, the truth in an environment that I'm in, which is sort of, we're in a growth phase, but we're still very young, is that marketing in general is considered an expenditure, which means that we are constantly having to discuss and convince someone why investing those dollars is a good idea. And I think because of what you see out there today, there's so many opinions about what the right measure is. There is a onus on educating my board to really make sure they understand that the dollars that are being spent from our investors are yielding the best results. And I think there's a ton of vanity measures that you could present to say this is really great, look at the engagement, look at the conversations we're having that are not necessarily translating to sales. For us, there's only one measure, and that measure is someone looking up a zip code where they're going to buy the product. And so it is on our website, and it is a very easy thing for us to see. You're either looking up a location or you're not looking up a location. If you're looking up a location, I have a corridor, and I know that you will likely convert it to purchase. So that has been a metric that's been sort of our key North Star. Now, what I will tell you is that it's very scary now to have to go. So we have a board meeting at the next month, and I have to go to them and I have to explain that our traffic and our lookup features will likely go down. And the reason they will go down is because AI and how it's serving up content is changing how consumers are looking for products. And so what you're now having is those beautiful summaries when you look up on Google that are now providing you answers to where you need your products. And now I have to go back and figure out what will be the measures for us next year, because I know that really nice correlation that I was able to link for location store lookup, is not sustainable based on the way technology is evolving and bringing it to market, but also because I think we're going to need to find a different signal that will tell us whether our work is working or not. And likely it won't be engagement. So it is something that keeps me up at night, and I know I've asked a couple of you at this yesterday, but how do you operate when the content is coming back served to you and the brand is no longer a destination per se for the human, but more for the AI technology that will search it, and then what the measure would look like?
That is quite the challenge. Okay, well, we have time for one more question before we head to audience Q&A. Let's start with a piece of advice, or let's end with a piece of advice, rather. If you could give one piece of advice to the brands in this room who are trying to go local without losing sight of the big picture, what would that piece of advice be?
That's a good question. I think that for me, I'll sound like a broken record, but I think I would say make sure you really understand your brand. Like, so if you're a US-based brand, understand why it works here, and then don't be afraid, don't assume that will be the same reason why it works in whatever new city in the US you're launching in, or country, because as Kate mentioned, your New York consumer and your Iowa consumer are very different. And if you want to be truly a national brand or a global brand, you have to understand them all. So I would say, yeah, don't be afraid to get to know those consumers in those different places. Like one time we did research literally just in Des Moines, Iowa, to make sure we understood that person. So yeah, don't be afraid to get in there with them, talk to them. Like Kim said, I think there's no real replacement for actually talking to people. I know we can do like big surveys and get a lot of data, which I think is very valuable as well, but sometimes you get more of the why, which can help you build really smart business building and marketing strategies. So that would be my advice.
Good advice.
You know, I think in general, our local activations outside of just the search funnel, which is really something that's important to us because it's that moment of intent, they don't typically pay out. And the only way that you make them create scale or have them create scale is, and I think Bobby did a great example of this, is you take something local and then look for a way to amplify it with your community, especially on social, because our target audience, who was mostly women under 30, are so heavily engaged with that community. And so, you know, the advice I would have is make sure that the local is actually solving a local problem. And in our case was you need to find that store. But if you do find that the local marketing is a piece of work that could go for you, find how much you can amplify that. Because the event itself or the activation itself, I haven't found likely to actually pay out. But it does work if there is some momentum to bring it to a larger scale.
Okay, that was it for my questions. John, do you mind?
Yes, but we
asking
have
one?
time for one question for the panel. First of all, round of applause for the panel. Great job. Thank you so much. Anyone have a biting question for anyone on stage? Okay, we're going to do one, and then we'll kick it to the next section here. Just let us know who you are, where you're from.
Hi, my name is Ian Simpson from Pathmatics. I just have a question about the nature of your products, which is very health focused, which lends itself to that local need, right? Someone finding something locally. Just based on like your work in this market, what are other health products that have that same kind of need? Like, if you're trying to take lessons from what you guys are talking about, I think there's some incredibly good ones, but I'm just curious to understand, like, where else is there sort of the comparable need in the market as you might have seen it in surveying like the whole, to try to find some best practice in your universe?
I can go and say that, and I would say that Kate's is much more hyper-local, so very challenging. She's probably never bored. But to me, I think that if you want to be a great business that truly breaks through across markets, because you can usually see, like, if your brand only does well in Texas or it only does well in New York, sometimes that's like a money problem, right? Like, you don't have the money to advertise, you don't have the media budget. But a lot of times it's a messaging problem, as Kate said, and like you don't probably understand that person, or the products that you're offering aren't right for them. So something less high stakes, like working on native deodorant. When I joined the business, we saw that we were actually just doing well in New York and San Francisco. Part of that's because the brand started there. In San Francisco. Part of it, as I dug deeper, I was like, why is this? And then why do we see seasonal spikes and seasonal dips? And what we saw is because we were a product that kind of people thought it would fail, right, in summer. And so that also people in hot places also thought it would fail. So then we decided to like make the messaging about the efficacy of the product, have people give testimonials, and our business grew. I mean, the business is now over $1 billion business. It like 5x'd in that time. And so it really was becoming hyper local in that way of like, hey, I'm a big business right now. I'm a hundreds of millions of dollars business, but I can be bigger if I actually get outside of my little bubble in San Francisco, New York, if we start doing influencer events in those places. So I would say everything should be hyper local if you want to scale your business.
And I think I'm going to have a bit of an unpopular opinion on this, but I would, if I had to predict where we're going to be in 5 years in healthcare, is there is a massive disruption on local delivery of products and products that you need right away. If you have a sick kid and you're getting their temperature at 8 p.m. or 9 p.m. at night, you're likely living in a neighborhood that may not have a pharmacy that's open. And what I don't think that the current environment sees, and I get to see it because there's 150,000 convenience stores in the United States, is that most of them are local and they're open late, and today they do not focus on healthcare, but I think they will actually take over what the future model of healthcare is going to look like, which should be incredibly scary for the CVSs and the Walgreens of the world. I mean, frankly, Target and Walmart as well. Because products that you need right away, this group cohort, that the young generation that's coming through, they have no patience to wait for its delivery until tomorrow or the day after. So I think what it's disrupting is sexual wellness, of course, is one of it. But I think anything that has to do with, I need to feel and heal my symptoms today, and I need them right now. I mean, I'm actually curious in the audience to grab you guys at lunch and say, how many of you have ordered a product today to the hotel or will be ordering the product? Because when I talk to women who are 22, they're like, oh yeah, I did Uber Eats this morning for this and DoorDash yesterday. So in healthcare specifically, I think you're going to see a channel shift. You're going to move people out of the traditional channels. I think you're going to see a delivery model that is really coming on strong with the DoorDashes and the Uber Eats to get things local, hyper-focused. And then every single product that it is immediate need. So it's I have a temperature, I have a UTI infection, I need a pregnancy test right now, you call it. I think that's going to be a huge disruptor in what's going to come to the future of the healthcare space. The prescription stuff is a little trickier because you can't put it in a convenience store, but I think the rest will shift.
Amazing. Okay, awesome. Thank you both so much. Continue the conversation with Kate during the breaks or with Jasmine during today's roundtables.